Hey guys, it's me, Rich. You're about to find out why the federal government legally cannot do most of the things it does. In this video, we're going back to 1788 to a document almost nobody under 50 has ever actually read to find the exact words that define where Washington's power ends and your state's power begins. We're talking about Federalist 45, written by the so-called father of the Constitution himself. And if you stick with me till the end of this video, you're going to have a one-sentence question that will stop almost any politician in their tracks. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Look, if you like our videos already and you haven't done so, you should become a subscriber to the channel. You can hit that notification bell and smack that like button because it helps us get our message out to more people. Also, you'll be notified when every single new video comes out. And thank you. So, as we get closer to the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, it's worth sitting back for a second and remembering just how ridiculous it was that this country exists at all. In 1776, Great Britain was the single most powerful military force on the planet. Full stop. Not one of, the most powerful. And the British Crown looked across the Atlantic at 13 colonies full of its own subjects and assumed, reasonably at the time, that they belonged to the king. The colonists looked back and said politely, not anymore. What happened next is one of the great underdog stories in human history. A ragtag collection of farmers, merchants, tradesmen, and part-time soldiers beat the most powerful empire on earth and walked away with their independence. Now, most countries don't get a founding myth like that. We got it because it actually happened. But independence wasn't the system. The Constitution came later. And look, if you watch this channel, you probably know the Constitution better than most Americans walking around today. We talk about it constantly, but there's a companion set of documents that most people, including a lot of people who think they understand the Constitution, have never actually sat down and read. I'm talking about the Federalist Papers. Here's the difference. It matters, okay? The Constitution tells you what the government is supposed to look like. The Federalist Papers tell you why the founders built it that way. One's the blueprint, the other is the architect explaining itself. The Federalist Papers were 85 essays written between 1787 and 1788, defending the proposed Constitution and trying to convince the states, specifically New York, to ratify it. Alexander Hamilton wrote 51 of them. James Madison wrote 29. John Jay wrote 5, all 3 published under one pen name, Publius. Not because they were being mysterious for fun. They ran these essays in New York newspapers like the Independent Journal, the New York Packet, and the Daily Advertiser. And anonymity was the style of the day for this kind of political writing. And here's a fun bit of historical trivia for you. The entire reason these essays got written in the first place was to convince New York to join the Union. New York was the holdout. And the governor of New York at the time fighting against the Constitution, well, his last name was Clinton. It was George Clinton. No relation to the Clintons you're thinking of. Wrong century, wrong family. But if you wanted a reason to laugh about it, I mean, there it is. Leave it to a Clinton to hold out against the Constitution. Now, a lot of people, particularly on the left, like to point out that the Federalist Papers aren't the Constitution. And technically, yeah, they're right. The Federalist Papers never got a vote. They're not law. But here's what they conveniently leave out. Judges, lawyers, and yes, multiple presidents have cited the Federalist Papers for over 200 years to interpret what the Constitution actually means. Because the Constitution was largely written based on the exact arguments laid out in these essays. You don't get to wave away the blueprint's explanation just because the explanation itself didn't get ratified. So today we're zeroing in on one essay specifically. Federalist 45, written by James Madison, a man historians call the father of the Constitution. That's not a nickname they hand out for participation. I'm not going to walk you through the entire essay. I want to go straight to the part where Madison spells out point blank where federal powers begin and end and state powers begin, because there's no ending. And here's the thing that you need to understand before we even get into the quotes. What Madison describes here in Federalist 45 is exactly the sentiment that went into being written up into the Constitution itself. So let's set the stage. Before the Constitution came along, we had the Articles of Confederation. Under the Articles, states operated basically like separate little countries. Guess what? They still are. Each state could pass its own laws on commerce, citizenship, you name it. And because of that, states were constantly clashing with each other. Legal disputes were common. In some cases, things nearly escalated into actual armed conflict between states. Let that sink in for a second. States almost went to war with each other before we even had a real federal government. Now picture it like this. New Jersey could have passed a law saying that only New Jersey businesses could operate within New Jersey's borders. Sounds small. It's not. That kind of law would have crushed Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, every neighboring state suddenly locked out of a major market. And now you've got an economic feud on your hands. Now, the founders looked at that mess and said, we need a neutral referee, not to run everything, just to handle the stuff that affects the whole country, nationhood things, foreign policy, interstate commerce, national defense, treaties, immigration, relations between the states. Centralize those specific things, leave everything else alone, and you reduce the friction between 50 competing little fiefdoms, 13 at the time. So here's exactly what Madison wrote in Federalist 45 about the powers of government under the proposed Constitution. This is the part you need to let your liberal friends hear. All right, here it goes. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The former will be exercised principally on external objects, such as war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, with which the last power of taxation will, for the most part, be connected. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all the objects which, in the ordinary course of affairs, concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state. It goes on. The operations of the federal government will be most extensive and important in times of war and danger, those of the state governments in times of peace and security, as the former periods will probably bear a small proportion to the latter. The state governments will here enjoy another advantage over the federal government. The more adequate, indeed, the federal powers may be rendered to the national defense, the less frequent will be those scenes of danger which might favor their ascendancy over the governments of the particular states. Now, if you get a chance, go out on the internet and find the 50 million links to copies of the Federalist paper. Read it again in your head. Few and defined versus numerous and indefinite. That's not vague language, guys. Madison is drawing you a map with a thick black line down the middle of it. He tells you exactly what falls on the federal side: war, peace, negotiation, foreign commerce. Why? Because the founders did not want all of the states freelancing their own foreign policy. Imagine Texas negotiating its own trade deal with France while California does something completely different with China. It's not a country, guys. That's chaos wearing a flag. And then Madison tells you what falls on the state side. And this is the part people skip past. He says the state handles all of the objects which in the ordinary course of affairs, meaning all the things you do in your life, okay, concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state. That's not a short list. That's nearly everything. That's daily life. That's basically the entire domestic experience of being an American. And here's where it gets specific. Madison's framework lines up directly with what we call the Enumerated Powers, found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. I talk about it all the time on this channel. Enumerated just means numbered, for those of you who claim to be liberals, listed one by one. If a power isn't on that list and it wasn't added later through a constitutional amendment, the presumption is simple. That power belongs to the states or to the people. Now, for simplicity, let's say it belongs to the states because the people are the states. Because that's how they felt back in the day. Which brings us to the cleanup hitter of the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment. Those words should be tattooed on the inside of every congressman's eyelids. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. They refer to the United States, which is the federal government. Okay, let me repeat it. The powers not given, not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That's it. That's the whole amendment. It's not complicated. It's a leftover power clause. Whatever the federal government wasn't specifically handed, the states and the people get to keep it. Even if those rights were not even thought up yet. Those powers, even if the powers they couldn't even fathom were made up yet. Now, does the federal government actually operate like that today? Of course not. Politicians have been stretching, bending, and in some cases outright ignoring those limits for decades. But here's the thing about a written constitution. It doesn't update itself just because people in power decided to stop reading it. The document is still the supreme law of the land, whether Washington respects that or not. Getting back to the powers delegated in the original Constitution should be the next revolution in this country. Because if we got back on the constitutional path, over 90% of this country's problems would be solved almost overnight. When I say revolution, I mean peaceful. I mean, we should push to get us as close to the constitutional path as possible. It would be good for everyone. So here's your homework. And honestly, here's the most useful thing you'll get out of this whole video. Next time some politician, doesn't matter which party, though we all know which party does this more, the next time a politician announces a brand new federal program, a brand new federal mandate, and a brand new federal regulation on some corner of your life, ask one simple question. Where in the Constitution is that power granted? Is it in the Enumerated Powers of Article 1, Section 8? Or did it come through a constitutional amendment? If the answer is neither, if there's just a shrug and well, it's for the public good, you already know that Madison, Hamilton, and Jay would say about that. You're not being difficult by asking, guys. You're asking the exact question the founders wanted every single citizen to ask. Every single time. So here's the upside. The blueprint already exists. The instructions are already written down in plain English by the people who actually built this thing. The federal government was never supposed to be the answer to everything in our lives. But the more people who actually pick up Federalist 45 and the 10th Amendment, the harder it gets for anyone in Washington to pretend otherwise. That's not pessimism. That's a roadmap. Now look, we're going to be talking more about this on our live stream this Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Tell me what you think about this. I'd love to hear your comments down below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.